I fake being smart. Here's what happened. The graduation ceremony felt like a lifetime ago. A lifetime spent fielding awkward questions at family dinners. So, Ethan, what are you doing with that history degree? The tone dripped with implication. My parents, bless their well-meaning hearts, had always envisioned me as some kind of lawyer or doctor. History was a hobby, not a career path. Vivian, my girlfriend, was the only one who didn't make me feel like a complete failure. A nurse, she dealt with real life and death situations. My struggles felt trivial in comparison. You'll find something, she'd say, squeezing my hand. You're smart, Ethan, just keep looking. But looking felt like throwing my resume into a black hole. Rejection emails piled up, each one a tiny stab at my self-esteem. I started doubting everything, my choices, my abilities, even my degree. Then I saw it. An opening at the Prescott Historical Archive. Archivist assistant, the listing read. Requires deep understanding of American history, archival practices, and meticulous attention to detail. My heart sank. I knew some history, sure. Enough to pass my classes, but deep understanding, meticulous attention. I was more of a broad strokes kind of guy. But then a different kind of feeling crept in. Desperation. I'd been unemployed for 6 months. Vivian was starting to carry more of the financial weight. My parents' subtle disappointment was growing louder, so I did something stupid. I decided to fake it. I spent the next week glued to my laptop, cramming every historical factoid I could find. I researched archival practices, memorized terminology, and even watched YouTube videos on document preservation. I became an expert on 18th century handwriting, sort of. The interview was held in the archive itself, a grand old building filled with the smell of aged paper and leather-bound books. It felt like stepping back in time. Mr. Abernathy, the CEO, was an older man with a stern face and a tweed jacket that looked like it was older than me. Dr. Eleanor Vance, the head archivist, was a different story. Sharp, intimidating, with eyes that seemed to see right through me. Mr. Abernathy asked about my historical expertise. I rattled off dates, names, and events, regurgitating everything I'd crammed. He seemed impressed. Dr. Vance, however, remained impassive. Tell me about your experience with primary source analysis, she said, her voice cool and precise. I stumbled. Well, I began, stalling for time. I've worked extensively with various primary sources during my undergraduate studies, analyzing them, interpreting them, drawing conclusions. I felt like a fraud, a complete and utter phony. But somehow I kept going. I used vague terms, made sweeping generalizations, and managed to sound, at least superficially, knowledgeable. To my shock, it worked. A week later, I received an offer. I was hired. Vivian was thrilled. I knew you could do it, she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. I tried to share her enthusiasm, but a knot of anxiety was already forming in my stomach. The first few weeks were a blur of panic and improvisation. I was surrounded by people who actually knew what they were doing. Dr. Vance was always watching, always testing. She'd casually drop obscure historical references into conversations, waiting to see if I'd pick up on them. I learned to nod sagely and pretend to understand. Chad, a coworker my age, was genuinely brilliant. He knew everything about everything. He was also incredibly competitive, and I could sense his resentment at my seemingly effortless success. He'd offer to help, but his assistance always came with a subtle undercurrent of condescension. I relied heavily on Google and Wikipedia, frantically searching for answers whenever a question came my way. I'd spend hours after work studying the documents I was supposed to be cataloging, trying to decipher the handwriting and understand the historical context. Mrs. Higgins, the office manager, was a lifesaver. A friendly, gossipy woman, she was a walking encyclopedia of office lore and historical tidbits. She inadvertently gave me enough information to bluff my way through several conversations, but my charade was taking its toll. I was constantly stressed, always afraid of being exposed. I was snapping at Vivian, losing sleep and feeling increasingly guilty about my deception. You're acting weird, Vivian said one evening, watching me pace around our apartment. What's wrong? I couldn't tell her the truth. Just work stress, I mumbled. It's more than that, Ethan. You're not being honest with me. I hated lying to her, but I couldn't risk everything falling apart. I'm fine, I insisted. Really? Things started to unravel when Mr. Abernathy announced a special project, a public exhibition showcasing a newly discovered collection of letters from the Revolutionary War era. And he assigned me to lead it. I was completely out of my depth. Letters were written in archaic English, filled with obscure references and complex historical context. I tried to delegate tasks, but my lack of knowledge became painfully obvious. Doctor, Vance saw her opportunity. She assigned me the task of authenticating and translating a particularly challenging set of letters. She knew I couldn't do it. I spent days struggling with the letters, trying to decipher the handwriting and understand the meaning. I consulted online resources, but they were of limited help. I even tried asking Chad for assistance, but he just smirked and said, "Wouldn't want to steal your thunder." Desperate, I decided to fake it. I fabricated translations, making up historical details and attributing them to the letters. I figured nobody would know the difference. I was wrong. During a presentation to Mr. Abernathy and the other staff members, I proudly presented my translations. Dr. Vance listened patiently, her eyes narrowed. When I finished, she spoke. "Mr. Prescott," she said, addressing Mr. Abernathy, "are you aware that the battle described in these letters never actually took place?" My heart stopped, and that the individuals mentioned in these passages were not even alive during the Revolutionary War. She continued, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I stammered, trying to defend myself. I must have misread something, or perhaps," Dr. Vance said, her gaze fixed on me. "You simply don't know what you're talking about." The room went silent. Mr. Abernathy's face was red with anger. Chad was smirking. Mrs. Higgins looked horrified. Mr. Abernathy stood up. "Ethan, I think we need to have a talk in my office." The meeting was short and brutal. Mr. Abernathy was furious. He accused me of lying, of misrepresenting myself, of betraying his trust. He told me he was deeply disappointed in me. I tried to apologize, to explain my desperation, but he wouldn't listen. He said he needed time to consider my future with the archive. I walked out of his office feeling like a complete failure. My career, my reputation, everything was in ruins. Vivian was waiting for me at home. She could see the devastation on my face. "What happened?" she asked softly. This time I couldn't lie. I told her everything. My struggles, my desperation, my deception. I confessed that I had faked my way into the job. She listened in silence, her expression growing increasingly sad. When I finished, she didn't yell or scream. She just looked at me with disappointment. "I can't believe you did that, Ethan," she said quietly. "I thought you were better than that." "I'm sorry," I said, tears welling up in my eyes. "I messed up." "You did," she said. "You lied to everyone, including yourself." She told me she needed some space to think. She packed a bag and left. I was alone. The next day I received a message from Mr. Abernathy. I was demoted. My responsibilities were significantly reduced. I was essentially back to being an intern, fetching coffee and filing documents. My coworkers treated me with disdain. Chad avoided me. Dr. Vance barely acknowledged my existence. Mrs. Higgins offered me a pitying smile. I knew I deserved it. One afternoon, Chad approached me. "Look," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "I know you screwed up, but you're not a bad guy. You just made a mistake." He told me that he had also made mistakes in the past, that he had once cheated on an exam and regretted it ever since. He said that the only way to move forward was to learn from my mistakes and try to become a better person. He suggested I start reading more about history, genuinely learning the subject. He even offered to lend me some books. I took his advice. I started spending my free time reading about history, not just memorizing facts, but actually trying to understand the context and the significance of events. I attended local historical society meetings. I even enrolled in a night class in history at the community college. It was hard work, but it was also rewarding. I started to genuinely enjoy learning about history. I realized that I had been so focused on faking it that I had never actually given myself a chance to learn. Slowly, things started to improve. I made amends with Vivian. She was still hurt and disappointed, but she was willing to give me another chance. She said she admired my willingness to admit my mistakes and try to become a better person. At work, I started to earn back some respect. I diligently performed my duties, always willing to help out and learn from others. I even started to contribute to discussions, offering informed opinions based on my newfound knowledge. One day, Mr. Abernathy called me into his office. He didn't apologize for his harsh words, but he did acknowledge my efforts. He said he was impressed with my dedication to learning and that he was willing to give me another chance to prove myself. The story doesn't have a completely happy ending. I didn't get my old job back. I didn't become a renowned historian, but I did learn a valuable lesson about honesty, humility, and the importance of genuine effort. The last time I saw Mr. Abernathy smile was when I was helping Chad prepare a small exhibit about local colonial life. Mr. Abernathy stopped by to observe. "Prescott," Chad said to me after Mr. Abernathy left, "you have a real knack for this. You always had it, just buried under layers of deception." I volunteered. Well, Chad said, grinning, let's just say you were ambitious. Ambitious and wildly unprepared. It was true, and it was also the truth I needed to hear. I was on the right path now. The humiliating experience of being exposed, the loss of trust, the near breakup with Vivian, all of it was necessary for me to actually appreciate what I was doing and to realize who I wanted to be. Now I sat studying my history textbook, a determined look on my face. It was a long road ahead, but I was finally on the right track. My fake it till you make it strategy had backfired spectacularly, but in the end, it had led me to a place where I could finally be authentic, and maybe, just maybe, even a little bit smart.